Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome to another exciting episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I am 100% certain, as I am with every episode, but I mean, like, if you could go over 100%, you really can't. But if you could, I'd go over it today because I'm excited about our guest and his life journey, which, of course, includes a significant amount of appraisal. We're going to hear a little bit about that today. But before we do, you know that the lifeblood of content online is all about your commitment and your support. So thank you so much for not only subscribing to the podcast, whether you're getting it here on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or these days even over on YouTube. And of course, you're going to like this version, so you can double click that button. With that, Blaine, I'm so excited to have you joining us today.
Awesome to be here. Appreciate you having me, Michael.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's absolutely a pleasure. Well, people want to know, were you born this way, or how did your life come to intersect the appraisal and valuation profession?
Well, we would have to define what this way means, because there are a lot of aspects of me that, yes, you'd say he was born that way, but it's usually the negative aspects. Yeah, where I am today, no. All thanks to a lot of great mentors and people like that in my life that I've been able to look up to that have, kind of educated me along the way.
Love that. Love that. So were you born into a family around valuation, or were they doing different things as you grew up?
Yeah, funny you should ask. My father was a government worker. He worked for the court system. Okay. My mother was an interior designer, so she had her own business. She worked for some other paint stores and things like that. But no, entrepreneurship was not in our blood, so to speak, nor was valuation.
Wow.
I ended up falling into it through another avenue, which we can talk about. But yeah, it was not on my radar at all.
Wow, that's amazing. And so because of that, but you were at least, it sounds like, around some real estate if your mom was in the space that she was in. So did you get to help dress things up?
No, the funny thing was, it was actually my father. So my father worked for the court system, saw the opportunity. He had the entrepreneurial bug and decided he wanted to get out of working for the government. He took a Series 7, became a broker and things like that. And then through one of his clients, he actually got the opportunity to buy a inner city grocery store, a convenience store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so having no experience whatsoever, just being a farm boy, not afraid to try things, bought a grocery store in the inner city of Grand Rapids. And so at 16 years old, my brother and I went to work in the inner city, which was probably still to this day the greatest education I could have ever gotten in terms of dealing with people.
That's amazing.
Because it was just a whole different world. So yes. I learned so much from age, say, 16 to 20, 21 about human nature, about personality, about marketing, branding, salesmanship, creating connection with people, as well as running a business, understanding a P&L, understanding cash flow analysis and things like that. And so it was my father who encouraged me at that time when I was 17 years old.
That's
I
great.
talked about moving out of the house and buying real estate. He said, well, if you're going to buy real estate, Blaine, make sure you buy a rental property.
Oh,
live in one side and rent out to the other. So my first real estate investment was a duplex that I bought for $36,000. I lived in one side and rented out the other. And it was the first rental property I also sold 10 years later.
Oh, man.
That was my foray into real estate.
I love that. That is beautiful. So did you have the benefit of buying a duplex and then never having to pay for it again because the other side covered all your expenses?
That's exactly what happened.
I love it.
That again came from my dad. My dad said, well, the rent from the other side can help defray the cost of living. But as it turned out, my house payment was $400 a month, and I was renting the other side for $600 a month. So, and I was 18. So at 18 years old, it blew my mind that I could actually be cash flowing, as I learned the term later, on that property. And that really ignited the bug to buy more real estate and
that's amazing.
End up in that world. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I met my first real estate appraiser.
That is quite an experience. And then did you have just modest aspirations, or was it just like, hey, I've got this place and it's fine? Or was it like, oh my goodness, I've got this one, I should probably get another one?
Yeah, great question. I would say modest aspirations. I knew I started to get the bug and I saw what it could do. But it took my dad again to saying, well, you can leverage this one. That was when I was learning about leverage.
Oh, yeah.
You can leverage this one to buy your next one. And I said, well, why would I want to buy another one? I can only live in one at a time. And that's when I started learning about, renting out both sides. And I thought, okay, interesting. So modest aspirations, and they remained modest for many years. And it wasn't really till I met one of my first mentors in Chicago that I started to see and think bigger about that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, isn't it amazing how some people can just, as they say, pull back the curtains or, cast someone's sights a little further out, and suddenly everything you looked at doesn't look the same anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I've been very, very blessed and fortunate to have that happen probably 2 or 3 times in my life where your whole paradigm of the world changes.
Yes,
and you have these awakenings, and very thankful for those people.
Well, that's an amazing set of experiences to be able to work in a family-owned business. I mean, it's very different from having a job. I mean, It is a job, but it's really not a job. It's just part of the family. And then, as you mentioned, you were doing that with your brother as well as your family. Yep. And then, did you actually have free time when you were a young person, or was it you were just finished school, go straight to the convenience store?
Great question. And you nailed it. No, we didn't have free time. There was a lot of lessons learned in that because, as you can imagine, being family, you're working for below market rates.
You actually got rates, so it's like you get a place to sleep. That's how it goes.
Thankfully, my dad did. He actually did pay us, but you're expected to do so much more. But I'm really thankful that my dad's work ethic kind of rubbed off on us. We saw him working really, really hard. And so both my brother and I, we picked that up from him, and we learned a lot of lessons. But free time was not a part of the deal. It was exactly as you said. It was after school, you drive right to the store, and you work from the store until 11 o'clock at night when you close up. Saturday and Sunday morning, you were there at 5 a.m., opening up the store, facing the shelves, doing all that stuff. And so, I remember many years later when I moved on to my next kind of adventure, thinking, I have no idea what it's like to be able to, say, be on a softball team or a bowling league because you just never had time.
And fantasy football stuff people do. How did they have time?
That stuff wasn't even around back in the 90s, but a lot of life lessons came out of that.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely love that. Love that. And how is it that you didn't go and start a chain of convenience stores, or maybe you did?
I did not. And it was because I learned from that experience, half of life is figuring out what you don't want to do.
That is true.
At least that location, which was really in a really rough part of town at the time, which is why it was such a great education learning to communicate with people. But I just learned I did not want to have to deal with staffing people in certain locations. Obviously, the threat of robbery was always prevalent. The threat of theft, employee theft and things like that, which is normal in any business. But it really turned me off to businesses that required brick and mortar. I like the brick and mortar of rental properties.
Yes.
But those, of course, come with their own issues. But I didn't want to own a business. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew I didn't want to own a business that required brick and mortar.
Wow.
And so that led me down some different paths.
Completely makes sense. So what did the school of life bring you after you moved on from the grocery environment?
Yeah, well, actually, I didn't know it at the time, but I really wanted to get out of that environment. I felt trapped. I was creeping up on 18, 19, 20 years old, and I thought, is this what my life has in store for me?
Yes.
I wasn't college bound due to really my own lack of motivation in that area.
Sure.
But I was deeply embedded in the martial arts world. And so I met somebody that was part of what's called a live-in student program, living in Chicago, studying under an Aikido master. Aikido is a Japanese martial art.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden my this is one of those moments that my worldview opened up. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You actually live in the martial arts school and you study full time. Yep, that's what I do.
Wow.
And so I made application. I went to Chicago for a weekend, which was kind of like a weekend-long interview.
Sure.
I trained, and then I got accepted to a very traditional Japanese-style live-in student program where I lived in a Zen monastery.
Wow.
And trained in Aikido, essentially 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, travel around the world with this instructor, and did that for 3 years and learned about as much as one could about business, leadership, communication, dealing with people. It became so much more than just martial arts.
That's amazing. I'm just taking that in. That having the opportunity to be being a 3-year long understudy is, I guess, how I would maybe also frame it, and to travel extensively.
It was an amazing experience that probably could not be duplicated today.
Yeah.
The gentleman that I trained under a traditional Japanese master, both in Zen as well as Aikido, but in life and business as well. He was a very wealthy martial arts business owner, but he owned tons of real estate, and he had plans to take over the world, essentially, when it comes to building his martial arts empire.
Yes.
And so at 21 years old, I got to travel to Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, France, England, Wales, all around the world, places I probably would never have been able to go to. But what it did for me is it ignited my passion for mentorship and for coaching, teaching, and training. Which I didn't know at the time, but it came out much later in business that's where my real passion lied.
I think that's amazing to get exposed to that. And was your traveling with your Zen and Aikido master, was that because he was competing, or is that because you were competing?
No, there was no competition in Aikido. It's all just education. And so he owned 250 schools around the world. And so he would go to these schools around the world and do a weekend seminar. Yeah. And so the person who traveled with him is called in Japanese otomo, O-T-O-M-O. Okay. Your job essentially is to carry the bags, to take all the falls during demonstrations. Yep. You're the one punching the teacher so he can demonstrate the defense against the punch. Your job is to be a servant. And so I was learning firsthand servant leadership. Mm-hmm. And, you had to subjugate yourself. You didn't speak until spoken to. If you went out and you were having, beer and peanuts with the teacher and all the other students, your job was to make sure everybody's glass stayed full.
Oh, got it.
And basically take care of the instructor and everybody else before your own needs are met. That's the way that teacher was, and we learned that in spades.
Oh, wow. And how is it for those that have no experience around this, myself included? Why 3 years? Why not 2? Why not 5? Why not 250 schools of your own?
Yeah, good question. So the way he ran his program was minimum 1 year commitment. I think that was for both parties. If he didn't like you, he could get rid of you after 1 year.
Oh, okay.
But he also didn't want somebody to try to commit. It was a very intensive, a very aggressive program. You were training physically 8 hours a day. And then on the weekends, when you traveled around the country, around the world, it was 15-hour weekends, day and night. And again, you woke up before the teacher. You went to bed after the teacher's needs were taken care of.
Wow.
And so it was very, very intensive. Then after that, after each year, you would be asked to commit to another year if you wanted to stay on. He just did that, I think, to make sure that the accountability was there and the commitment was there, because each year got progressively more difficult in different ways.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. And so for you were there for 3 years. What came into your awareness that you were not going to go back for a fourth year?
Usually after the third year, the teacher says, you've learned enough. Now it's time to go out in the world and spread your knowledge.
Oh.
And so there were some who could stay, but usually they were then working for Mr. Toyota in his dojos. They became employees essentially. And I had no interest in becoming an employee. I was for a little while I lived there, but I wanted to come back home and do just what he said, which was spread the knowledge, which is what I did. I opened up my first school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I basically mimicked what he did. We opened up a big school, one of the largest in the Midwest, and we had full live-in student program, multiple students. Yeah, basically doing the same thing. Minimum 1 year commitment, maximum of 3. We were building teachers, essentially, building leaders, business people, and future instructors.
I absolutely love that. And then you touched on earlier how this fueled your interest in mentorship and coaching and teaching and training, which I think a lot of people give lip service to, but they don't really understand the difference between those 4 things. And they are uniquely different.
Yeah.
Would you mind touching a little bit on those? For many people, they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's it. For others, like, oh, wow, I didn't really get the nuances between those two.
Yeah, well, coaching, teaching, training. I mean, obviously, the training was the hallmark of what we were going through as live-in students. It's referred to as uchi deshi in Japanese, which is inside student, essentially. And your main goal was train as hard as you can every single day. but you were picking up these lessons. The coaching was going on kind of externally, one-on-one from the instructor, as well as one-to-many. You could see how he was talking to other students, leading his dojo, running his business. And so in Japanese culture, the concept is called Ishin Denshin, which is mind-to-mind transition, one-on-one mentorship.
Yes.
And essentially that's what you were getting. Your job was to be very intentionally observant of everything that was going on. And so you sat in every single meeting he was having, whether it was meetings with other students, meetings with other teachers, or business meetings that he was conducting. Your job was to sit in the back of the room, take notes, shut up, listen. And so we were getting coaching, teaching, and training all in the same moment.
Yes.
And learning, even though at the time I didn't fully understand at 21 years old what was being given to me at the time. It's, lessons that bubbled up over the years and years later, where you'd have some kind of encounter and you'd go, oh, that's what Sensei was trying to teach us.
I see.
And I'll tell you, I still have those moments today, 30 some years later.
I love it.
That those lessons are like diamonds in the rough that just kind of pop up and you go, that's what he was telling us about. So
yeah, I'm just reflecting on the amazing gift that it is to have that precious time with someone who's that committed to someone else's development.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly what it was. It's a great way to put it, Michael, because there's a kind of an old myth or story in Japanese culture that there's this ancient sea turtle that once every 10,000 years comes up from the bottom of the sea, breaches the surface of the water to take a breath, and then he goes down back into the water for another 10,000 years. Again, it's a fable, it's a story. Mm-hmm. But they say that meeting a capable, great mentor and teacher is the equivalent of that sea turtle coming up to breach the water and his head breaching through one of those circular, what do you call those buoys that you throw up? Life preservers.
Life preservers.
It's like the meeting a teacher of that caliber is a once every 1,000 or 10,000 year experience. And I feel very blessed to have been one of those people that kind of had that experience.
I absolutely love that. That is amazing. And that you replicated the same approach towards having a full live-in program and, of course, that investment in individuals. Does that Aikido program or school still exist?
It does. Yep. I ended up selling it years ago to some of my senior students.
Wonderful.
They still carry it on today. Not quite the same iteration. They don't have live-in students and all that, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a full-time academy had Japanese language courses and flower arranging classes and archery classes and karate, yoga, kendo, Aikido, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it was a great experience.
How many years were you with that business?
20 plus. I think we sold it at 22 years. And I did that while I was working, other jobs, working in a family business, venturing out on my own, getting into appraisal. I was running that dojo in the evenings, so you asked earlier about free time. I carried on the lessons I learned in the family grocery store.
Yes.
Not having free time in my adult life either. Why waste the time on this planet? It's so short. Go add value to other people's lives. And I did that through my school.
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLex turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLex helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLex today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylex.com That is appraisal at STORYLUX.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
I love that. I love that. So you just alluded to the experience that while you had your dojo,
Yep.
you somehow got into appraisal. How and why? I mean, it seems like you had such an amazing experience in martial arts, both receiving and also giving.
Yeah, great question. And you and I chatted about this before the recording. But everything you do, if you have a mind for opportunity, and that the opportunity is around meeting people,
yes,
and partnering, which is I coach now on a 5P system, and the final P is partnerships. One of my Aikido students was a very successful businessman who had already built a thriving appraisal company.
Got it.
And he was my student for many years in the Aikido world. And one day he approached me and said, you seem to have this skill set, not only in teaching and coaching and training, but also in running a business. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to partner with me to expand, scale, and grow my business? And up to that point, I had really never thought of being in the appraisal world.
Yeah.
So it's one of my, what I can call conversion stories, but I thought about it for a while, and I thought, building businesses is something I love to do, and helping people grow is something I really love to do. This sounds like a marriage made in heaven.
Love it.
So that was my foray into it. Now, I had no intention of ever being an appraiser.
People don't, Blaine.
Yeah, well, even at that point, my goal was to go in and be kind of a biz dev guy, help him develop the business. But I thought to myself, I better at least get licensed so I have some credibility amongst the troops.
Yep.
And so I went and got my first level of licensing. But even from that moment on, I thought, I'm never going to be a fully licensed appraiser because that's not my goal here.
Yes.
But as I got into it, I learned, okay, I better keep learning and growing so that I grow my credibility with these people. Mm-hmm. And of course, one thing led to another. And I saw the value in learning it from the ground up. But that was essentially my foray into becoming an appraiser.
Oh, that's amazing. And what decade was that?
That was 2000. I was working for that corporation from 1996 to 2001.
Oh, okay.
We grew it from 4 branches at the time to 9 branches around the state, and
nice job.
Exponentially grew the revenue to essentially 8 figures, and had an exit. So,
that's great.
After that, I went and started my own appraisal firm and grew.
Oh, you couldn't get enough. Like you not only grow one with a partner, you go out and take it on your own.
Well, like everything in life, I saw opportunity. I saw how we grew and scaled exponentially.
Yes.
It was like the testing field of my own principles and philosophy, and I got to do it at scale. I saw what worked, I saw what didn't work, and so when the time was presented to go out and start my own, I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing. And went off on my own and kind of made my own mistakes and learned as I went. And that's where I had my second conversion story, if you will.
Really?
Yeah, I started a traditional appraisal firm like everybody else does when they leave their mentor and they hang out their shingle.
Yes.
And we grew fast. I had an office building. We had 10 appraisers. We had all the office equipment and the accoutrements that go along with all that. And then 2008, 2009 hit. And I think it's where a lot of appraisers' conversion stories happen. And I call it a conversion story because I want everybody listening to understand, when you're talking about your past and your history, I don't think it does much good to talk about bona fides or your curriculum vitae or your resume. Nobody really cares where I got my education. What matters is where were we converted to do what we're doing today? And this is my real conversion was 2008, 2009, my business was decimated.
Yes.
Literally cut in half overnight.
Mm-hmm.
I had built a thriving business, both with my appraisers working with and for me, as well as my clients on relationships.
Yes.
And overnight with HVCC and all that, as many of you know, the relationships were gone. Literally, our best clients disappeared overnight because they went with AMCs. Mm-hmm. They didn't bother letting any of us know, hey, come over with us, be on this panel. They just disappeared.
Yes.
We had, one client was 20 grand a month in revenue and just disappeared. And the next month you go, where did that go? And you got to do some investigative work and figure, now they're with 2 different AMCs and you got to, anyway, we did that for about a year. Revenue was cut in half.
Yep.
The fun was cut by 98%. It was not enjoyable anymore. Wow. And I had an epiphany where it was, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm either going to close up shop and go do something else, or I'm going to figure out how to run it that is enjoyable for me and everybody else. And so I would say it probably took a couple months of me questioning, meditating on this question. Mm-hmm. How do we do it so that it's fun?
Yeah.
Which is when I hearkened back to, wait a minute, my passion is teaching, coaching, training.
Yes.
My passion is not in appraising homes. I enjoy the process, but I wouldn't say there's passion there.
Yeah.
I just knew how to do it really, really well. It was fairly easy. Mm-hmm. But what I really love is people development. And so the conversion, the epiphany for me, which brings us to today, was I said, okay, I am going to stop being an appraisal company and I'm going to become an education company that also happens to do appraisals. And we changed first just our mindset. We had company meetings. I proposed it to everybody and everybody kind of shook their head like, yeah, that sounds cool. We changed our core values a bit. We changed our process and our philosophy. At our core, we were still doing appraisals.
Yes.
But I set out from that day on to make sure I was in an office somewhere giving a talk, a speech, or teaching a class every single week. From then on. And for many, many years, that's what I did. And then we developed CE classes. We were giving talks from 10 people to 700 people. And it became my passion. Now, magically, as you can imagine, it also grew our business exponentially from where it was in 08, 09 and what had happened to our revenue. It scaled that up exponentially because all of a sudden now we started venturing into the non-lender world where fees were commensurate with what lending fees were many years prior. And that opened up a whole new world. So that's continued to this day.
Oh, that's great.
It's a foundation of our business. Always being out there in the market. We have several private Facebook groups for lenders and realtors and whatnot. We network religiously and consistently and intentionally and deliberately nonstop.
Yes.
And it is the foundation and the core of our business right next to people development. The people development never ends.
I think that's such an important point that people lose sight of around development, both personally and of a brand or a persona in the marketplace. Hearkening back to your grocery store days where that was an inbound business. I mean, appraisal isn't necessarily an inbound business. And, hence the focus on the networking. How have you really approached that over the last, 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, great question. I learned something valuable, Michael, years ago, which was more a psychological principle than, say, a market principle. And it's that, and you and I can relate as human beings, as can everybody listening. There are times in our lives where we are either problem aware or solution aware. Problem aware is where you all of a sudden become aware that you have some kind of issue that you want solved, but you don't know what the solution is. And on any given day, we all have certain problems or things that bother us in our lives, and whether we do something about it or not is another story. But we're problem aware. Yeah, I need new shoes. Okay. But then there are solution aware people. Solution aware people are that have already made a decision. They know what the problem is and they know how they're going to solve it. And maybe they're one step away from making the call, walking into the store, signing the contract, whatever it is. Yeah. Well, I realized in the appraisal business that most people, at least on the non-lender side, were problem aware. And then they started down a path to become solution aware. And if I could get in the middle of that path so that they met me when they were on their way to finding a solution, that I would likely become the solution for them. And so that's what we set out to do is we created all of our systems. We realized there's a before, a during, and an after process in every business. The before is all your marketing, your advertising, your brand building. During is when you're actually doing the appraisal work. After is when you're following up and you're sending handwritten cards and doing all that. So we just really clarified our before, during, and after process. And we put heavy emphasis on the before and the after. To get in front of the right people at the right time, network with all of the people who were out in the market prospecting, which is essentially lenders and realtors. And becoming the go-to authority for them, the problem solvers for them, so that when they had referrals come their way, because that's what happened on the path, the problem to solution path, is most people went, I know I need this thing. How do I find a solution? And they went to the next best person they knew, which was a realtor or a lender.
Yeah.
And then the lender would say, oh, well, you need to get a loan, or you need to get an appraisal, or you need to have this done. So that's what we set out to do, was become the solution for people who were problem aware, but not yet solution aware.
Makes a lot of sense.
Y'all
And a
have a
great way
great
to put yourself in the path of prosperity.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. How many years were you in appraisal with your former student, now partner, in growing that you got exposure and you got your experience and built up your street cred?
About 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a long time. And I will say, in full transparency, and I didn't know this at the time, who does, but when I came out and started my own firm, probably like many appraisers, I was not a good appraiser. We thought we were. Yeah. We thought
when you first start, you suck when you first start.
Yeah, so exactly. You know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
But I created my firm full speed ahead. Again, within a year, brought on 10 appraisers and the whole 9 yards. And it was only after I started reviewing other appraisals that I started kind of becoming aware of my own deficiencies and started seeking out education. But that was another 5-year process of going, oh, I got to be much better at this, especially in the non-lender world. You know, do your first divorce appraisal on a 1004 lending form and get spanked for it. And then all of a sudden you go, what? There's another form out there. So yeah, I learned a lot of lessons like most appraisers do, but that's why I'm also sympathetic when appraisal comes across my desk and I look at it and I go, boy, this is really deficient. But I think back to when I was there and I think, is there something I could do for this other appraiser? Let's have a conversation. And I try to coach and give input if they're open to it and learn. But yeah, I was only with my mentor, that mentor, for about 5 years before we parted ways.
Wow. That is, it's such a great time though, to be associated with it. And I heard you touch on an important piece, which I think individuals that would take the time to listen to this podcast very much would have this mindset. But, for those, maybe they'll be encouraged by their friend because they'll be like, hey, you should listen to this. You might get something out of it. You mentioned if they're willing in terms of, you're talking about feedback and, trying to help other people. How has that shaped your experience, from being in the grocery store, obviously, to having the opportunity to join your Zen and Aikido master, to starting your own school, to actually partnering with the student? It seems to be a common thread.
Yeah, great question. I did learn, and it still is something that pops up every day today, whether when we have inquiries and whatnot, things like that. It's the common phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It certainly happened that way for me. You had to be open and willing to listen. And I saw many people, by the way, when I was in that Zen and Aikido internship, I saw people come through the program who said they were interested in doing something similar, and they'd last a month. Because as the Zen story would say, your cup is already full. Your teacup is full. And so you had to empty your cup almost daily. And I found that to be a very useful metaphor for life, that no matter how high in your process, in your education or whatever you get, it's super helpful to empty your cup every day. And of course, when you do, you come across people that right away don't have an empty cup.
Yes.
They're more interested in telling you about how important and valuable and smart they are than asking questions and learning. So yeah, we still hold today. I mean, we have potential students reaching out to us all the time for coaching.
Love it.
We have clients who reach out to us, and we've got a filter, and the filter is, can we be good partners or can't we? We don't care what money is involved, especially when it comes to coaching students. If your cup is not empty, I'm probably not the right coach for you. You won't last long. So it's being open to, and appraisers have this in spades. I probably any career path where you're getting educated.
Yes.
You are basing your perception of your worth in the world on how good you are at the thing that you do.
Yes.
And maybe unnecessarily so. And so what happens is you come across appraisers a lot who will speak in education levels 8, 9, and 10 to people who speak in level 1, 2, and 3. They don't want to hear all the jargon. They want to be educated. Tell me what I need to know, but don't try to impress me with all your knowledge and your 3-letter designations and things like that. And unfortunately, I think appraisers get to the point where they think I've been doing this so long and I'm so accomplished. How dare anybody ever question me? But there are a lot of appraisers that just are not asking enough questions. I'll tell you the other big thing, Michael, in the appraisal world that I think is a travesty.
Yes.
That still today is not being addressed, and it's the lack of business education.
Oh my gosh. Did you just say that? You did not just say that.
It came out.
Wait a minute. Can I hear one more opportunity to take 28 hours of something that is not necessarily going to advance my well-being
exactly
and substitute it for something that would actually have a positive influence in a community? You must be kidding me, Blaine.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. How you branched out, how I branched out. We went out and started businesses. Now, I was fortunate to have had years and years of prior business training and coaching by 3 great mentors. I mean, my appraiser mentor was a multimillionaire commercial real estate developer in addition to owning the firm. So I was learning under this guy who today is still just one of the greatest mentors. And then, of course, my Aikido mentor was a great businessman. My father's a great businessman. I just got super, super lucky. So when I started my business, I at least understood cash flow, marketing, branding, salesmanship, understanding of P&L and all those things. But most appraisers think their appraisal knowledge is going to get them wherever they need to go in life. And there's just very little, if any, training and coaching on how to be a good business person as opposed to how to be a better appraiser. I mean, I just came back from one of the national conferences. I sat through many, many of the sessions, more than I have ever sat through in some of those. You and I met up at one of those years ago. One of my talks. That talk that I gave that you were in was one of the first business sessions they ever tried offering. And as you remember, it was standing room only, which I was honored to have be. 165 people in the room. They never did another business session after that. Now it's all policy panels and software and whatever else.
It doesn't make a lick of difference.
I don't understand it.
Those people that actually want to do more than just write reports. If that's all you want to do, that's exactly the sessions you should go to and the courses you should take. But I fundamentally believe that there's a lot of talented people out there that desire more.
I agree. And we see it in the forums. I mean, you see it on Facebook forums and whatnot, where appraisers, many are languishing today. Their business has gone south. They don't understand why. And so what do we do naturally as humans? We look for things to blame it on. And of course, they're going to blame it on the most obvious stuff, which is AMCs and regulation and policy and interest rates. Well, those are all externals that you have no control over.
Exactly.
If you had some internal locus of control and you had the business training and experience, you would find where the opportunity is in all of these things. And it's massive, by the way. Anybody listening to this, the opportunity to create a very profitable business in the appraisal realm is bigger today than it ever has been. You just have to know where to look, and you have to know how to leverage the opportunities that are out there. But you have to have a little bit of business acumen to do it. It's just not being taught anywhere.
No, because they get rewarded for checking the box on CE, and
you got it.
It's
unfortunate.
Yep, it's unfortunate. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with continuing education. I'm a huge fan of it. I do significantly more than whatever the minimums are. I actually do love learning, but it's like you. I am grateful to have been around people. You were in the environment, had great mentors. Mine was more the Fred Flintstone approach: one hand on the wheel, one hand on the road. And passing up other people on the road. Sometimes they're passing you, and you're like, "How do you do this?" Like,
great education. Nothing wrong with that. You're just speaking to the fact that you had your eyes and ears open.
To
learning.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the percentage of, say, coaching students in my program, coaching students in Dustin Harris's program, or any of the other coaches out there, the percentage of appraisers in those programs relative to the number, the total population of appraisers is 0.0 something.
Yeah, it's minuscule.
It's minuscule. And and unfortunately, it kind of speaks to some of the issues that appraisers are going through today, and they don't understand where it's coming from. You think it's everybody else trying to put them out of business, when in fact they are kind of their own worst enemy in many ways.
I have to agree with you on that one completely. That's a great observation and summation of where things are at today, which kind of brings us to the important question, and that is, given everything that you've seen and everything that you've experienced and all the conversations you've been a part of, what are you optimistic about or looking forward to over the next 3 to 5 years, Blaine?
Yeah, great question. I think there's tremendous opportunity, obviously, in building the non-lender side of the appraisal business. I think every appraiser out there who has not begun developing the non-lender side, and by that I mean you have to develop a whole set of skill sets that maybe you don't have today. It's not just about checking boxes.
Yes.
It's you have to get that business education. You have to be building up your personal brand. I think every appraiser not building a personal brand is going to be struggling over the next 3 to 5 years. But I think there's tremendous opportunity. Just taking the non-lender side right now, the non-lender side of appraising is not going to change much over the next 10 years. The lending side is changing currently and will continue to with AI and machine learning, the forms changes, what Fannie and Freddie are doing and trying and playing with. We're not going backwards.
Yes.
The speed of data aggregation is increasing exponentially. And so, appraisers are fans of saying, "Oh, just wait till all that crashes," and then when it all crashes, if it does, they're still going to find a better way. It's not like they're going to go back to the days of old and the processes of old. So I think appraisers need to really open up their eyes to what is coming down the pike.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it's here. I mean, just look at ChatGPT and what AI is doing. We are in the infancy of machine learning, data aggregation, and AI. The bottom line is whether appraisers think that that's going to produce a quality appraisal or not is not the question the lenders are asking. Lenders are asking, how quickly can we get this done?
Yes.
And what is our margin of error? And the margin of error is going down. Risk mitigation is also being taken over by AI and machine learning. And they're realizing they don't care if one house out of 1,000 has a cat piss smell or has a cracked foundation. It's built into the risk mitigation model that AI spit out for them. So, if an appraiser's out there complaining, going, well, yeah, you need me to walk through the house and smell the cat pee and check out, find the cracked foundation. Maybe to some degree, but it's becoming less and less important to lenders. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the lending industry is trillions and trillions of dollars floating through the air on any given day. And anything that's slowing that down will be at some point eliminated. Now, whether that means appraisers will be eliminated, I'm not saying that. But they're going to do everything in their power to mitigate anything that slows down that process of money moving and the money supply. So appraisers, I think, need to take a long, hard look at their processes and what they're focused on. And they need to become much more efficient and effective at doing lending appraisals so they can weather the margin compression, the decrease in fees, and still produce a high quality appraisal, but in less time, utilizing technology. But then they also need to develop the skill sets required to be able to go out for, when the market changes, Michael, which it has, and it continues to, and economically things get tougher and tougher, what always ends up rising, we call it the 3 Ds, which are defaults, divorces, and deaths. And all of those need appraisals, not to mention the 47 other areas that require non-lending appraisals. We've been doing it now for 12 years, and it's for the first time this year, it has exceeded 50% of our revenue, and it keeps increasing.
Good for you guys.
It just keeps growing. And there doesn't appear to be really any end in sight for people who understand what they're doing in that market, and people who understand how to create a personal brand. Really, nobody cares how good you are. You know the saying, nobody cares what you know. They care how much you care about them, essentially. So I would recommend anybody listening, if you write down these 5 Ps, to build your business, you need to be able to present, publish, package, work on your persona, and then partner with other people. You need to be presenting out in the public. You need to be publishing, whether that's on blogs, podcasts, YouTube. Get your thoughts and ideas out there. You need to have packages for people to buy. You don't just offer them one thing. Don't just say, oh, we have an appraisal and it's $500. No, have a desktop, have a drive-by, have a full with video walkthrough, have a bunch of different packages so people know they have options when they call you. And if they do, you'll be the differentiator in the market because everybody else they're calling goes, what do you need? Okay, it's $500. Give people options, package up your stuff. Persona, Google yourself today. When you turn off this podcast, Google your own name. Check what your persona says to the world. How many social media sites are you on? And what does that message say to the world? Are you on these videos giving people the finger? Do you have a stack of beer cans in front of you on social media? What does that say about you to the world? Check your persona because we live in an era where there is no crossover between commercial and personal, between your pages and the different social media profiles you have. Get a hold of your persona and make sure you craft it so that the world knows what it is you're about and what problem you solve. And then make sure you're always on the lookout for partners. Find people doing more than you. Find people who need a problem solved that you can solve and partner with them. Present, publish, package, persona, and partner. Those are the opportunities in the next 3 to 5 years for appraisers to take advantage of, in my opinion.
Absolutely fantastic, Blaine. We're talking about just feeding with the fire hose today. This has been wonderful. I am so grateful for you coming and sharing a little bit of your perspective. We're very grateful to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Oh, it's indeed a pleasure. Friends, as I mentioned to you, I knew it was going to be a full 100% and then a little more. And we have definitely filled it to the brim, as you heard Blaine mention on more than one occasion, about do you have the capacity and do you have the willingness? So thanks for being part of this, and make sure to light up the comments. You know, Blaine, as he said, he's got his 5 Ps. Make sure that you're getting on yours too. So with that, again, Blaine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, my friend. It's been an honor.
Wonderful. Until our next episode, go out and have a fantastic day.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.